Welcome to another episode of the Doctors and Dollars podcast, where we discuss health insights and wealth secrets. I'm your host, Nate Crannell, joined today by Dr. Michele Cho-Dorado. Michele is a board-certified pediatric gastroenterologist, a medical director at Evacor Healthcare, a real estate investor, a children's book author, and the founder of Bright Futures EDG. Her new book, Reach for the Stars, introduces basic financial concepts to young kids. Bright Futures EDG was formed to be a platform to share this information about financial literacy while empowering kids to be bold and to think big. Welcome to the show, Michele.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Nate.
You bet. What's going well today?
Well, my kids are getting over an illness, and we're getting ready for vacation, so excited for that.
That's very fun. It's going around. I don't know if it's just a Midwest thing. If the whole country is being captured by this, that might be something that you have way more insight than I do. But certainly the congestion and the cough is going around the Crannell household as well.
Yes, the viruses are definitely going around.
Yep. The vacation is Disney. That's exciting. Nothing
Yeah,
better than taking your kids on
yeah,
an
yeah.
airplane and then spending all your money at Disney.
Yeah, so actually we're gonna drive and it's a surprise. We haven't told them yet that we're going, so we're gonna surprise them.
Ooh.
So we're excited.
Okay, so that's curious. At what point do you tell them? Is it because you're in the Chicago area, correct?
No, no, we used to be in Chicago. We're now
Used to
in
be, yeah,
Charlotte.
you're in Charlotte. So
Yeah.
drive is shorter. At what point do you get through South Carolina? Do you make it into Georgia? When do you tell them?
I think we're just gonna say that we're going to Florida for vacation and then we're just gonna show up at the Disney resort and I think they'll just be surprised.
That's awesome. Did you and your husband get the hat with the ears?
Not yet, not yet. We don't really, I've gotten a couple t-shirts, just for the trip, but prior to
Yeah.
that, we've not been like a Disney crazed family for the most part. So
hmm
we'll see if that changes after this week.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, we weren't until Disney Plus came out. And then it's like when they get access to every single one of their favorite movies whenever they can, it's hard not to.
Yes, but people are, you know what, diehard Disney fans. It's, when
hmm
people go in, they go all in. So we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I know people that have tattoos of the Mickey Mouse logo or the Disney logo on their
Yeah,
body somewhere. So that's
yeah, yeah. That
people are
doesn't
diehard.
surprise me. Yeah,
You're
for
you're not
sure.
the diehard though.
No, I'm not yet.
Not yet. Your kids are at the perfect age to do it though. What's their favorite movie right now?
They go through phases. So my daughter has been Elsa for 3 years in a row for Halloween.
Yep. Yep.
So she's still a fan of Frozen. And what else do they watch? They like, oh my gosh, what's the Encanto? They watch
Oh,
Encanto a lot.
it can't, yeah, Encanto is every other day, I think, played in my
Yeah,
house. And
yeah.
then Leo is a new one that just came out. I
Oh
don't know
no,
if your kids have watched Leo yet, but
we haven't heard that one yet. Yeah, they definitely go through phases where it's the same movie every day for weeks and then it goes to the next one. And then we kind of rotate and come back to it again.
yeah.
So
And now you're just perpetuating it by driving to
I
Florida and
know, I know.
revamping all of it.
But we're excited. I'm excited more for them actually.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Well, aside from this week's travel for you down to the Sunshine State, you've traveled a lot in your career. So I wanted to start there. You grew up in Chicago, did your undergrad and medical school there. Then you ventured off to Los Angeles for your residency and fellowship, worked out there. Tell me about that decision to head west.
So I have always been very close to my parents in terms of just physically. I went to school not
Mhm.
that far from home. And I think in my mind, I just always imagined that I would stay in Chicago forever. I
Mhm.
never had the intention of leaving. And I think the end of my medical school, around fourth year when we were applying for residency, I had this thought where one, I thought I needed to cut the cord from my parents. And then two, I just thought, you know what, if I'm gonna stay in Chicago my whole life, I thought I should experience something outside of it, at least for a short period of time. And I thought residency might be a good time to do that.
For
And so
sure.
I remember it was a very scary thing to do, but I remember changing my rank list around and ranking some out of state programs, and in particular it was LA and New York where I applied. And I ended up matching in LA, which I was very happy about, but I knew nobody there. And so that was a scary thing, but it honestly was the best decision I think I ever made. I just grew so much as a person and just experienced, a lot more diversity and open-mindedness, things that I just hadn't been exposed to growing up. And so, yeah, it was a great experience. I was there for 6 years for residency and fellowship, and then made my way back to Chicago when I took my attending job. And also had plans to live and die there, as mentioned. I met my husband and he had other plans. And so here we are, not in Chicago anymore. But
There you
yeah,
go.
that's kind of what, yeah.
What attracted you to pediatrics then? And I mean, even specifically pediatric gastroenterology, it's very specific specialty. When did you find that? And then what made you decide, hey, this is going to be where I head?
You know what? I've always geared towards working with kids. I just loved being around kids. I would babysit, in high school, even in college, I found ways to babysit for families around my campus. When I was in medical school, I volunteered as a Sunday school teacher, so I would do that on Sundays. And so I think I just always knew that I had a heart for kids. And then when I was in residency, I think it was just the GI topics and the GI patients. There's was more interesting for me. And I just found myself reading more about those patients and wanting to learn more, and it just piqued my interest. And everyone kind of will, lean towards something of interest, and I didn't want to do primary care. And so I think it just was a natural decision for me. Yeah. I didn't really struggle with deciding what to go into, actually.
Yeah. What's the most common case you had? I think what's when you think gastroenterology, I just think like upset stomachs and the 3-year-old that gets diarrhea for a little bit. But like what's the most common thing that you were seeing in that pediatric world?
Yeah, so the bread and butter of pediatric GI is, I would say, like reflux in the babies and
Hmm.
abdominal pain in the kids. That's kind of the more general common symptoms that we see. But we manage chronic diseases like inflammatory bowel diseases, celiac disease, liver disease, allergic diseases of the esophagus like eosinophilic esophagitis. And so there are more chronic diseases that people have that we manage. And then there are kids who have complex feeding issues. And so we'll deal with, feeding difficulties and things like that.
Gotcha. You actually perfect segue into you mentioned it into my next question around celiac disease. So my middle daughter has it, kind of doesn't have. Our doctor said, hey, if 1 to 10, 10 is celiac disease, your daughter's like an 8, like very close, almost there. I don't know if I would diagnose it as that. And then my other two kids just seem to be sensitive as well. Tell me what's behind celiac disease? Like what do you think causes it or what is believed to cause it? And then what are some of the, I guess, treatments to either alleviate it or eliminate it?
Well, it's an autoimmune disease. It's your body's reaction to gluten, which is a protein. So there's blood work that you can do as screening tools, although those are not diagnostic. So I'm guessing that your daughter's been scoped and had some
Hmm.
biopsies taken. Yeah.
Hmm.
So there are characteristic changes in the lining of your small intestine that would be consistent with celiac disease. The only known as of now cure, or not cure, I would say treatment, is eliminating gluten from your diet. And
Hmm.
so with gluten elimination, then, there's healing of the intestinal mucosa and usually symptoms resolve.
Yeah. And we did that. We figured that out when she was 2. She's almost 7 now. Got really bad like eczema on the back of her legs and her lower back. We could not figure out what it was. Or we thought it was eczema, right? It was just her skin breaking
Yeah,
out. And
well,
then,
yeah. I was gonna say there's a characteristic skin condition that's associated with celiac.
yep.
Yeah.
And she had, I mean, it looked like she sat on the stove at some point. It got really bad. But yeah, you're right. Eliminating that from her diet for gosh, nearly 2.5 years, and then have slowly introduced it, every now and then, has handled it a lot better. And so that's why it's always top of mind for us as we're ordering food or buying groceries and things like that. We always have to think about it. So it's just curious that you brought it up, and
Yeah. Well,
that was something.
technically, if she has celiac disease, she needs to stay gluten-free for a lifetime because,
Mhm.
if she either has it, the diagnosis, or she doesn't. So if she does have it, then it is a lifelong treatment of being gluten-free.
Gotcha. Yeah, she's that 8 out of 10. Like we've introduced it, and she hasn't had any issues since then, breakout skin and things like that. So it's been managed, I think, a little better. I think what we were told is, yeah, eliminating it when she was that young, I think just like it like flushes the system. And I don't know if that's accurate, but yeah, never got the true diagnosis of, hey, this is celiac disease. It's just like, man, she is just, her body doesn't like it very much. So
And
eliminate or greatly reduce it.
I'd be curious what her blood work and her biopsies show.
Yeah, I'm not, yeah, definitely not a doctor when she was 2. So yeah,
Yeah.
wouldn't know how that goes into it. But with your own kids, and I know now you're not practicing directly as in the GI space, but how aware are you, not just as a mother, but as a doctor with your kids and the things that they have going on? And were there things that you did, as your kids have gotten older to say, hey, I've seen it all. I've seen all the good and the bad. and I don't want my kids to have to go through that.
I mean, I think being a mother changes your perspective. When
Mhm.
you go through training, you read what's in the books and you learn about all the textbook cases and you see some zebras and things that don't present exactly the way that you are taught. And then when you have your own kids, then you start to, I think, understand that a little bit more, where, things that your kids do or the way they present or the symptoms that they have don't exactly fit what you're taught in school or by the textbook. And so I think I had a lot more understanding for that as a parent. So I think that that also made me a little bit more compassionate as and empathetic as a doctor as well. So I definitely do think that it changed my perspective in the way I practiced.
Yeah, you now have the motherly intuition, right? That kind of creeps
Yeah.
in and that kind of takes on the forefront. And then I know that you were still practicing at the time. At least you had your first kid, maybe even your second child. But how often did you find yourself in a room with someone else's kid and the motherly intuition kind of kicks in and you say, "Hey, here's what the book should tell me I'm doing, but like here's what I know is
Yeah, and
working."
you gotta trust your gut. You gotta listen to the patient, listen to the mom. And so I think it takes on a whole new meaning when you're a mother yourself.
Mhm.
But yeah, yeah. So yeah.
Awesome. When you made the decision, like I said in your bio, you're medical director now. What prompted that decision? Where did it go from, hey, I want to be an attending physician, an active clinician working with patients, to then kind of taking a step in a different direction and becoming a medical director? What were some events that led to that?
Yeah, so I think we talked about this a little bit last time, but it
Hmm.
just sounds so very cliche. But when you have kids, your priorities change. And
Hmm.
it was something that just took a while for me to process because, medicine's such a long road and you go through so many years of school and training to get to where you are. And so the thought of potentially leaving practice, it was a thought that kind of crossed my mind initially, and I couldn't really come to terms with that
Hmm.
again because of the training I had gone through, and so much of my identity was in being a practicing pediatric gastroenterologist. It took a couple of years, after I had my second kid, and also in that time frame, my husband and I had been talking about relocating geographically, so moving out of Chicago where we were at the time. And so things just kind of came together where I think after a couple of years, I would say some minor like health scares that came up that just also kind of made me look at my priorities differently. And then that with the plan of trying to move, it just kind of came together at a time where, we had said, what, if we're going to move, this might be a good time to transition. And so I transitioned to a position as a medical director where I could work remotely, and that allowed us to move, and it allowed me also to be home more with my kids and have some more flexibility and predictability with the schedule, which has been great. And that all happened right as COVID was happening. And so, I had taken the job not realizing what COVID was going to be. And in hindsight, it ended up being such a blessing because, with kids as well, you can probably remember just all of the school and daycare closures that were going on around that time.
Hmm.
And so to be able to work from home and kind of manage easier than when you were in practice, it was just a blessing.
It was good timing there. As you were
Yeah.
making some of those decisions, who are the peers or the mentors that you kind of leaned on as you're making those decisions? Because like you said, your identity was around being, a medical doctor, right? And so still, and I think I made the joke last time, like they didn't take the MD after your name, Michelle. So you get to keep that
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
stop being attending.
Can you
But
tell that to my
uh
parents?
yeah, exactly. Well, that's kind of where I'm going with this question is, were your parents, were those someone that you kind of confided in to make these decisions? Did you have mentors within your healthcare system that you talked to? Kind of tell me about that process.
Yeah, so I definitely did not talk to my parents about the decision until after I made it. And in fact, after I resigned, I was scared to tell them because my first thought was they're going to be so disappointed. With that said, they were very supportive, so I'm very thankful for that. And they're still supportive. I would say that around that time, I had come across a community of physicians who were talking about financial matters and just had different perspectives on career and making passive income. And it was a community of doctors that thought in a way that I hadn't really been around before.
Mhm.
And so I would say that that made an impression on me because through that community, I ended up educating myself more on personal finance and different ways to invest money, I had not even understood what it meant to invest, honestly, like up until a year prior to that, probably. And so that really helped change my mindset. I did a lot of reading, and it just completely changed my mindset as well as my husband's, and it changed the trajectory of our journey in terms of where our focus and energy goes. And so that was a huge shift for me and ultimately led me to writing this book for the kids because I felt so financially literate for so long, and I was, nearly 40 before I was learning any of these things. And so with our little kids, we thought we don't want our kids to go that long or any longer than they need to without learning any of this stuff. And that's kind of what prompted that whole idea of writing a book.
Yeah. Why is financial literacy so exciting for you? I mean, obviously you've dedicated a good chunk of your career to medicine and treating patients. Financial literacy is kind of a whole different window to look in, right?
Yeah.
You could have got into to jogging or to yoga or something like that. What excites you about financial literacy?
You know, I have to say, I was almost embarrassed that I went so long without understanding the topic. I
Hmm.
think that part of it is what I told myself because I had not known about it or educated myself on it for so long. I mean, I went through all of school and training and even almost a decade into being an attending without knowing any of this stuff. And so it was almost like I hadn't known it up until now, out of sight, out of mind. Like I just had told myself that I'm just not good with money. And it's something that I just didn't even bother trying to learn. And so once I started educating myself and hearing other people talk about it, you realize that it's a very important aspect of your life, right? It's your
Hmm.
money, and who's going to manage your money better than yourself, right? And even learning about tax strategies. I mean, there's ways that you can save more of the hard-earned money that you earn rather than giving it away. And
Yep.
that's something that was a new concept to me. And it just kind of blew my mind that I didn't even try to understand this stuff sooner. And so I think when it comes to kids too, I think that if they're learning how to manage money earlier on, I think there are a lot of other aspects that are important in terms of developing oneself. So, outside of just managing money, I think you're learning to make decisions, you're learning to be more confident, you're learning leadership skills. And I think that will also help just with self-esteem, right? And I think if you're learning the different concepts of managing money in terms of like saving and giving and investing, I mean, even with giving, I think that you're teaching kids to be more compassionate and have more empathy. And so I think these are all really important characteristics for a kid, and especially in this age where, the the world that my kids are growing up in is so very different from when I was growing up. And so I was just telling my son the other day that when I was a kid, there were no iPads, and he was shocked. And he's like, "What do you mean there are no iPads? You didn't have?" I was like, "It didn't exist," you know?
Hmm.
And so I think nowadays kids just see things and there's immediate gratification. They're able to get whatever they want. I mean, you want something on Amazon, it comes the next day, And I think it's funny to think about, even taking a picture. Like we used to have those cameras where we'd have to like take out the film and drop it off at the photo shop and wait a week to pick it up. And then you
Yep.
notice the photo bomber in the background and you're like, and you can't do anything about it. It's just a different time. And so I just think that I think all these qualities and skills that you learn from having financial literacy, I think are very valuable for kids to learn these days.
Yeah, those are all amazing thoughts, Michelle. For people listening that don't have the visual here, I was nodding my head the entire time. I agree with 100% of everything you just said. Kids need to have better financial education earlier for the exact reasons that you just mentioned. And I've talked to many other physicians who've echoed some of the same thoughts that you just had around financial literacy later in their careers. And some of that, I mean, if you're going to point blame, some of that could have been in high school where we learned trigonometry, but we didn't learn, how to look at a tax return or balance a checkbook, which we don't really have to balance checkbooks anymore. Again, back to your iPad comment, we really don't
Yeah,
have to do that. Online banking has become a big thing, but I've had some physicians tell me there's a bit of resentment towards their undergrad degree because most were pre-med or neurobiology or whatever it was. And then through medical school and residency, you're just not taught the financial things, right? You're taught medicine and you're taught, patient care and all the things that allow you to be great at your job, but not necessarily as great with your finances. And if I could have a soapbox to stand on and say one of the biggest things that I think should change around healthcare, it's around that education, not necessarily an undergrad, because you could literally have an undergrad degree in political science and still go out and become a doctor. But to get into medical school and to have a lot of that training then I think is super important. But you've taken it a step further, which I think is great. And that's educating kids even before that, when they're in their, primary years, right, of learning, when they're in school, I think is amazingly important. And you've done that and you've started that journey with your book, which I think is, a children's book is such a unique way to share information about financial concepts. Like what helped you decide that this was the medium you're going to do? You could have done a podcast, you could have, been a contributor to a magazine, you could have done anything, but you wrote a children's book. Tell me about what made you decide to do that.
Well, I think part of it is that when I made this decision to leave practice, there was a bit of a grieving process because even though I have no regrets and it was the right decision, I'm so happy with it, I was still giving up a part of my identity. And it was a part of my identity that I felt for myself was a calling of mine for so long. And so just trying to come to terms with that, it took a while to process. I think my husband at the time really wasn't even sure what was going on. I was trying to explain
Mhm.
to him, and I think I didn't maybe even understand what I was experiencing for a while. But I think that I shared earlier, I've always had a heart towards the pediatric population and towards helping kids. And part of it is also having my own kids, wanting to teach them. I think it melded the two together very well because the initial inspiration was, I want my kids to learn this. And then from that, I wanted to share it with as many kids as possible. And
Mhm.
so I think that's kind of how it progressed and the idea progressed and formed. With that said, now I'm so much more passionate about it because that's where my heart is towards helping kids, and I'm not practicing and seeing kids as patients anymore. I still am in medicine and healthcare, but not seeing patients and not
Mhm.
seeing pediatric patients. But I still feel like now I'm still able to help in a different way the same patient population, by educating them. And so, and again, I think just with what kids deal with now, I mean, I'm nervous about the teenagers, to be honest. My kids are still young, but I just hear about all these different complex issues that kids deal with. And if there's any way to mitigate any of those things, I do think that, teaching them financial literacy and building these leadership skills and confidence building skills and decision making skills and learning to weigh risks and in rewards, I think those are all very important skill set to have, and I think that that could help in that way as well. So yeah, I think that's kind of how things evolved.
Yeah. Reach for the Stars is the name of the book. When does that come out?
So it's been out since
Okay.
earlier this year. Yeah, so I have
Awesome.
actually a couple more books coming out in probably early next year.
That's what it
Um,
was. Yep.
but yeah. So Reach for the Stars has been out, so that is available now.
Yep. For those who haven't seen the book yet, give us kind of a synopsis, I guess you could say, of some of the financial concepts you talked about. You talked about confidence, leadership skills. What are some of the relevant financial concepts that you're talking about within Reach the Stars?
Yeah, so the book it's basically it follows the journey of a little girl who starts a business, and it's a way to
Awesome.
earn money to buy something. And in the process, she, introduces different concepts managing money. So she learns to earn money and save money and give and invest. And it's also a book to empower kids to think big, share their ideas and think big and it emphasizes the fact that, you can give and still like there's some delayed gratification, I guess is what I want to say, that when you're giving it takes longer to get to where you are, maybe because if you're saving money, for example, but in the end it's still rewarding and you can still find ways to get your reward at the end. So kind of along those lines. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to talk about, I mean, you're probably experiencing it with your two kids, and I definitely have it with my three kids, is delayed gratification. Like just the idea that they have to wait for something, right?
Yes.
It's just
Yeah.
painstaking. I'm gonna guess that gets worse as they get older, which I'm not looking forward to either. But I just think it's such a unique way to express some of those common things that we want all of our kids to have. We want them all to learn this. Again, going back to just general education, elementary, junior high, high school, a lot of those topics that you just mentioned are not even taught there. So it's like, where do kids eventually learn this? Do they wait until their adulthood on how to invest, how to create different strategies that promote delayed gratification, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that could be not even talking about money or finance, but there's just so many other topics that, a lot of these are relevant to. So, or relevant, are relevant, not irrelevant. Sorry,
Yeah. And kind
are
of to
relevant
that
too.
point, even as physicians, we experience delayed gratification in the sense that you go through training with very little pay, right? And
Hmm.
and then you become an attending and then you make a more decent salary.
Hmm.
And even with that, I would say you're poorly equipped to handle that transition from going from making trainee's salary to an attending salary. You have a sudden jump in income and we're not equipped or taught how to manage that. And so more often doctors get a double or triple, their income and start spending like crazy to make up for
Hmm.
lost time. And so even within delayed gratification, I think there's still opportunities to teach how to appropriately and responsibly spend and manage your money.
Yeah, we see that a lot in Grain Vision Capital, and I did in my previous career as well. Just the triple or quadruple jump in income, all of a sudden it's well, I need to treat myself. I need to do all these nice
Yeah.
things. And a lot of it comes down to lifestyle, is what I've seen, where it's just like, well, I'm a doctor now. I'm respected within the community. I have to uphold a certain visual lifestyle that everyone can see. So go buy the nice new car, the beautiful home, and then they fall behind, or they're back to a really tight budget. And so I'm sure that there's a lot of concepts within this children's book that even adults could take some note of. Without giving too much away of other books that you have coming out, in the future, is there interest in creating a similar story, but more focused on adults, less on children?
No, not right now. I
No?
think there's
Nice.
yeah, there are plenty personal finance books out there for adults, many of which I've
Hmm.
read, and they're excellent. No, I think I have a heart for kids. And so my focus is on children's books.
Yeah. What's the next one that don't have to give away title or anything, but what's kind of the next theme of the next book?
Yeah, so I'm developing a series. So it'll be,
Yes.
similar and relevant topics, I would say. But yeah, in
Okay.
different forms. Yeah.
When you think of the topic of finance as a whole, which could incorporate a ton of different things, what part of investing or saving, or you mentioned tax strategy earlier, what's probably the topic that gets you most excited right now?
Well, for my husband and I, we started learning about real estate investing, and that was very exciting for us. And so finding ways to also use that as take advantage of tax strategies related to real estate investing, that was a whole new concept for me, at least. And that's been exciting. So I would probably say that tax strategies in general, again, something that did not even occur to me. And, I don't, again, embarrassed to say that because physicians are typically high earners and are typically on the higher end of the tax bracket, right? And so
Hmm.
if who doesn't want to save more of what they earn, right? Or keep more of what they earn. And so there's different tax strategies that, again, just I wish I had learned these things earlier on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, as we work with physicians all the time, the thought never crosses a lot of their minds. And maybe it does, and they just feel like there's no way to overcome it, is that like every time that they go work, 40 cents of every dollar that they earn goes to the government. They clock in, they get to the hospital, they get to their clinic, 40 cents of every dollar is going to the government, and they just don't know ways to overcome that. And so tell me why you think real estate as a tax strategy should be well known within the physician community. Why is it important you made a great point of it a second ago, that physicians historically are high income earners, but also high taxpayers, typically because most are in the W-2 space, and it's hard to deduct from there unless you're in private practice and truly operating a business. But why do you feel like a lot of physicians should understand real estate investing and be a part of that culture?
I mean, when it comes to taxes, there are ways to take advantage of those tax strategies. So you're probably familiar with real estate professional status or
Mhm.
with STR, doing the STR loophole and taking advantage of bonus depreciation. And I think that's such a huge way to save on taxes. And again, I think that's one of the most appealing parts of tax strategies when it comes to real estate investing.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's a lot of resources out there for, and it doesn't have to just be real estate, but as someone who found investing and financial literacy a little bit later in life, like you had mentioned, do you feel like there's enough resource literature out there for physicians to become more financially literate if they're not? If you feel like they are, what are some good areas that people can learn, and where did you learn most of your information?
Yeah, I think that there are more spaces now than there used to be, probably like
Mhm.
5 years ago, with respect to physicians learning real estate. And so there are a number of physician communities that have a specific focus on learning about either passive investing or short-term rentals or multifamily. And so those resources are definitely available now. And again, I think they weren't probably as many even 5 years ago, but I would say in the past couple of years, it seems like more physicians are becoming aware of it,
Mhm.
and there are more spaces to learn about it.
For sure. What do you think sparked it? Was it COVID? I mean, COVID was almost 4 years ago now. I can't believe that. But was it COVID that
Yeah,
you think really sparked this turning trend of physicians, becoming more aware of real estate, or what was it that was it low interest rates? What was it that happened that you think sparked all this?
yeah, I mean, I think COVID probably did jumpstart a lot of people into it just because I think doctors were realizing that they were trading time for money. And during COVID, I did hear about a lot of doctors whose hours were either cut or whole groups, being laid off. And I think they were realizing that, doctor jobs were not as stable as everyone once thought. And
Hmm.
so, everyone's looking for alternative ways of making passive income just so that you can work on your own terms rather than working because you have to pay the bills. And so it seemed like there were more people, more physicians interested in passive income or making passive income around that time frame. With that said, I mean, there have always been physicians around in real estate, prior to that too, but I definitely noticed an increase in number over the past couple of years.
Absolutely. How do you think that this new trend, and I would say you are now in that camp of understanding that investing and creating passive income or creating alternate sources of income outside of, directly being a physician. How do you think that's changed your world? And when I say your world, I mean career-wise. How has that changed your family life with your husband and your kids? What has that done for you guys to all of a sudden have this education in the financial space?
I would say that it's changed our mindset in the sense that we see that there's more possible. And I
Mhm.
think before all of this, when I was just in my W-2 clinical practice job, everything was just a narrow path, and I was just following that narrow path because that's what was expected. So I never looked outside the lines, never thought outside the box. I just did what was the next step, and that's just how we're trained. And so once I stepped out of that box, I suddenly realized that there are a whole new world of possibilities, like writing a children's book and being an author, and creating an education platform and being an entrepreneur, and being a landlord and being an investor. All these things were just, completely new. And it's been exciting just to realize that you can do so much more than what you put yourself into a box to be.
Absolutely. And you have definitely done so much more. Just knowing your background and your history of what you've done over the last 5 years is super exciting. What type of impact do you hope that the book, again, Reach for the Stars, what type of impact do you hope that creates for kids or even the parents who are reading the book to their kids? What would be your ultimate outcome for that?
Yeah, I recently heard somebody speak about creating family legacy
Hmm.
and tying it to financial literacy. And, basically the thought is that when it comes to teaching kids about money, it's not just a material thing, but you teach the kids to create value, right? And so if they're creating value, where value is created, money will follow. And I think having that kind of mindset of abundance and responsibility, I think fares much better than trying to teach kids to accumulate money and hoard money, right? And so I think having that kind of value system, I think ultimately, I mean, hopefully that helps families to be more deeper connected and I think also teaches kids to like some of the things I mentioned earlier, just helping kids to be more kind and generous and empathetic and compassionate, while also being more confident and having more self-esteem because they're making more firm, solid, well-informed decisions and they can feel more like a leader. So, I mean, I hope it helps kids for the better in terms of just their all-around preparedness for life.
Yeah, and again, for the listeners that are listening and don't visually see it, I'm nodding my head again with everything that you said. You're 100% accurate. I think our philosophies on life and money and parenting align quite a bit. So that's always exciting to see. Last question for you though is we talked about the outcome. What outcome you hope to have from it? Have you seen any impacts since writing the book and releasing it? You know, you also you used to get that kind of instant. You can see the impact as you treated, pediatric patients, clinically. Have you been able to feel impact that your book has had on kids or on their parents since releasing the book? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think it's more from feedback that I get from parents
Hmm.
who are reading the books with their kids, who say that their kids asking questions. I had a friend message me a couple months ago saying that at the dinner table, the 6-year-old was talking about how they're going to finance his college education and and things like that. And even this is a story I've shared a couple times, but my kids when I wrote the book they were 1 and 3, and so very young, and you don't think that there's maybe some parents might think, what's the point of, reading this book or, telling the story to a 1 and 3-year-old? They're not going to get these concepts. But I think that when you're exposing them to the words and verbalizing them and saying them out loud, they hear it. And so my now 4-year-old, we have this money management box, and one of the compartments on the box is invest. And so she was putting a coin in there, and I asked her, what does invest mean? And she said, grow. And it just surprised me because I don't half the time I don't think she listens to what I'm saying, but
Yeah,
yet she was able to tie the word grow to invest. And whether or not she really understands the concept, I'm sure she doesn't, but it just made me realize that they do listen and they do hear you. So, the more you verbalize it and say these things and the more they're exposed to these concepts, I think there's no harm in it and it's only beneficial because I think the more you hear it, repetition is key, right? So over time it'll sink in and they're more in tune to learning, I would say.
absolutely. That is beautiful. Where can everyone find the book? Reach for the stars. Where Amazon, I'm
Yes,
guessing, where everything
yeah,
is,
you
but
can get
we don't
on
want to give Jeff,
Amazon.
yeah, we don't want to give Jeff Bezos any more money. So where can we
Yeah,
find
that's
it?
right. So yes, it is on Amazon. I also have, you can get a hard copy, personalized and autographed on my website, www.brightfuturesedg.com. And then there's some other products and some free downloadable activity sheets and content on there and active like resources, learning resources and things like that. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, last thought that I want to have from you. Tell me about Bright Futures EDG.
So it's an education platform. So, the first thing I did was write the book. And
Hmm.
after I was ready to publish it, I just felt like there was more to what I had to share than just putting out a book. And so that's where I thought, I'm sure there are other parents who have kids that are the same age as mine and, want resources to maybe share with their kids, or maybe they don't know how to introduce these topics. And so I wanted to create a platform where parents can go and find these things. So I created some like simple downloadable worksheets that some are just fun, like word searches and things like that. Other ones are like coin matching, just so that kids can visually see the coins and match them to the value, things like that. There's some resources, education links on there on different types of practical tips that parents can do at home. And yeah, it's basically, kind of in line with my mission of wanting to educate kids and increase financial literacy for kids and be a resource for parents.
That's fantastic. Brightfuturesedg.com, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Awesome. We'll throw it on the screen. We'll make sure when this episode goes up that everyone knows about it, can go out there and build more financial literacy and financial education for their kids. I think that is a fantastic movement that I will always get behind.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You bet. Well, I'm so glad you came on the show today, Michelle. Wishing you the
Yeah,
best as you travel down to Florida for Disney with a few little kids.
very
A lot of our
excited.
listeners probably are like, "Oh man, she doesn't know what she's getting herself into." But I hope you have a great time and we'll bump into each other soon.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.